Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Hey everybody, welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo, and I am here with Abby Silfies. She's the executive director of the American Heart Association here in the Lehigh Valley in Eastern PA. And Abby is a force. She is a force. We're so lucky to have her here doing this job in the Lehigh Valley. So Abby, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I kind of feel like I'm fangirling right now.
I feel the same way.
I'm like, I'm on it.
I'm so glad you're here. I want people to get to know you a little bit better and tell them about where you grew up and kind of what kind of kid you were. What's your family structure like? Give us a little snapshot into your early life.
Sure. So where I grew up, it's kind of funny. I would tell anyone that my hometown is Rockford, Michigan, because I spent my later elementary school years through college in Michigan. So I always say that home for me is the Great Lakes state in Michigan. However, I actually was born in Houston, Texas, and I moved around a ton leading up to third grade as my dad kind of started his job as my role model from birth as he worked his way up a corporate chain. And so he was an assistant manager of a shoe store when I was born and retired as the president of retail for Wolverine Worldwide a few years ago. So I got to watch my dad have this amazing career that he literally moved us from city to city until he found the company that he ended up working for over 30 years. So
what an incredible experience. And I love that you realized that. I mean, did you realize it as a kid, or when did that sort of come into play, that what you'd been witnessing?
We lived in Chicago when I was in first grade, and I got to go visit my dad in his office in like the city. We took the train in from the suburbs and we went to see my dad, and I realized in this suit and tie and commanding a presence in a room that my dad was making something of himself. And when we moved to Michigan and kind of settled there because it was the headquarters of the company he took his position with, I just remember all of a sudden seeing my dad in a different light and realizing that he worked so diligently to get there. And so, you know, we kind of were taught from a very young age, you get a newspaper out, you babysit, you work for everything you had. And so I loved having the defense when I was in high school. And yes, I grew up on a lake and we had fun toys on the water and such like that. And so people would say, oh, you live on the lake, or, you know, you're doing your homework on a boat or something sarcastic like that. And I always was like, I don't come from money. I come from a family that taught me how to work hard, and my dad worked for every single thing we have. So
yeah, it's so easy for people to see the conclusion, so to speak, or the ultimate picture. I say a lot of times young people will look at, you know, someone in their 40s or 50s and say, well, you know, why aren't I there? And it's like, well, wait a second. Can I tell you about the 25 years I just put in to get to this spot? And you know, it's important to realize those building blocks along the way. You mentioned the lake and your love of the water. What kind of kid were you? I mean, were you into like sports, music, art? Describe your early self.
Yeah, so from the age of 4 on, I had a soccer ball at my feet. My dad was passionate about soccer, and I may not have been the firstborn, you know, son. I was his firstborn child, and so he was you're going to play soccer. And so started playing when I was 4. He was my coach through all of elementary school, which I think, you know, made me passionate about it because it was our bond. But I played through like varsity through high school, and then played some intramural when I started college. So soccer was my sport, but my hobby was definitely being in the water. We bought a house on the water when I was 9, and it just became the everyday activity. So jet skiing in the summer and snowmobiling in the winter was definitely part of, you know, our after, you know, extracurricular activities for sure.
That's so much fun. And what about school? Was there anything, were you academic? Were you into a particular thing? Just something you were terrible at?
So all of the above, right? So I was that really great elementary school student that then hit middle school and decided I wanted a social life. And so there was always that struggle of balance. And I still think that's funny, right? Because where you were at 12 is where you are at 42, where I sit here and go, I still like work every day diligently to balance those things because I want to work hard, but I want to play hard. And that I think has always been my personality. But yeah, I'm terrible. Oh my goodness, math, chemistry. I mean, I can remember my mom going to parent teacher conferences my sophomore year of high school, and I had always been this like straight A student. And they were like, your daughter's failing chemistry. And my mom's like, what? My
Chemistry, I just want to tell you, this is something we have in common. So chemistry is where the wheels came off for me as well. And I had been pretty good. I was always in like the advanced math class and could take the next science level through middle school. I went to an all girls high school, so I don't know that the social part was so much of it, other than I feel like it was my first lesson in a phrase I love, which is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I suddenly realized, like, I kind of like, the English and the public speaking and history a lot more. So my energy was going there. And I just was like, I don't have brain space for this nonsense.
Yep.
Chemistry was definitely where I was like, I'm done. Math and science, we're done. It's over.
I think that's funny you say that. So I had a teacher in high school. It was kind of funny. I always said he kind of moved up with me. He was my 8th grade English teacher. And then when I went to high school, he had moved to the high school. So I had him for like freshman English, and I think I had him for English literature, and he was the journalism advisor. And so I worked with the school paper. And so he was somebody who was involved in that. I mean, I literally had this gentleman for like 6 of my classes. And I can remember sitting with him because he was a mentor to me in that time and saying like, I don't understand this. I can't do this like that. And he's like, Abby, not everybody is an expert in everything. You just need to give it your best effort and get through the class, because ultimately it's one semester of 1 year of your life, and over the grand scheme of things,
what an awesome perspective though, right, to get early on. I think we both have children, and there's sort of this framework in the world that like they're supposed to be good at everything. Like we want them to get straight A's, but the reality is, and often they can achieve that, but what's it at the expense of? Like if they really aren't passionate about something, yes, you have to learn it, but do you need to learn it to that level? And I think that's important. It's that balance of like, well, you have to take the course and stick through it. You can do anything, for a semester, like you said, doesn't mean it's your lifetime. So that's a cool early lesson.
Yeah,
tell me a little
absolutely.
bit about college. I mean, did you always know you wanted to go to college, and how'd you make that choice?
It's really funny you asked me this, because I had a conversation about college just yesterday, and I like haven't gone back to there in a long while. And somebody said to me, did you always know you wanted to do nonprofit work? And I said, oh, no. This is A, my second career, and B, not even the career that I even dreamed of a million years ago. So I went to Michigan State University, and I went to Michigan State with the intent of studying broadcast journalism. Yep, not at all anywhere near what I was doing. My intentions were to move 2.5 hours from where I grew up to Chicago, and to be, in downtown Chicago doing the news, because that sounded incredible to me in high school. And very quickly, after starting at Michigan State, I was like, I am not so sure this is what I wanted to do. I had went to work for a corporate restaurant chain when I was a junior in high school. And I had the unique experience of that restaurant being brand new when I started there. So literally everybody who were regulars at that restaurant were people that knew me from day one. And I kind of built this really great rapport with our customers. So I took a hospitality business class the second semester of my freshman year, and things just kind of clicked in my head. And I was like, I could really be about this. I love customer service. I love building relationships with people. And I thought, this is something that instead of talking to people through a screen, I can be right with people every single day. So that's where kind of the trajectory changed. And the chain of restaurants that I worked with offered me a really great opportunity this summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college to travel the country and do new store restaurant openings. So I was part of a team.
That's amazing.
It was the coolest thing. So I was in like Lebanon, Tennessee for 3 weeks and would do a restaurant opening, and then we'd pack up and we'd come back to Michigan for 4 or 5 days. And then I'd be in some city like Syracuse, New York for 3 weeks and, pack up, and then we'd be, wherever. But I traveled to like 7 different states and cities that summer doing these restaurant openings. And there's something in me that was just fueled and excited. So hospitality business is where I stuck with. I also studied marketing because they kind of went hand in hand. And I stayed working with the restaurant chain that I started at when I was 16 years old for 11 years. And that was the start of my career with them.
It's interesting. I actually spoke to a mutual friend of ours this morning, Lindsay Watson, and Lindsay was talking about how her first job out of college, she didn't know what she wanted to do, and she went to customer service. And it is amazing how often the experience of customer service is so valuable in any direction you go, right? Anything you do in life, that aspect of connecting with people, having some empathy, problem solving, that customer service provides, it really is a great foundation. So it's amazing at such a young age, you found that connection and actually could make a career out of it.
Yeah. And it's been something that I've always been able to go back and utilize my days as a restaurant manager, or a trainer that I was for a restaurant chain. I've always been able to use that as background or a resource for me, even in my much different career that I have now.
Well, speaking of that, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about that pivot and the shift that you made almost a decade later of being in the hospitality business. So everybody stay tuned. There's lots more to come with Abby Silfies. You're listening to Unscripted.
As a mother of 2, I know it can be tough to find activities that everyone will enjoy. Luckily, the Lehigh Valley has so many ways to treat your family without breaking the bank. You can experience cool discoveries at the Da Vinci Science Center or all aboard the WK&S Railroad train for an afternoon adventure. There's fun around every corner of the Lehigh Valley, and you can uncover it all on Discover Lehigh Valley's website. Visit discoverlehighvalley.com for more information.
Welcome back to Unscripted. I'm being joined by my good friend, Abby Silfies. She is the executive director of the American Heart Association here in the Lehigh Valley in Eastern Pennsylvania. And she's been telling us about her amazing childhood and, I guess, progression through college to find her love of customer service, people, helping people, and working in hospitality. But you made a huge pivot about a decade later, Abby. So tell us a little bit about what happened in your life and what caused you to change career paths?
There's actually 2 major changes in my life that happened. First of all, I decided to become a mom at an early age, and I decided not to stop at 1 child or 2 children or 3 children. And when I had my 3rd daughter over a 5-year time span, I decided that one of the things that I had always struggled with in my life was balance. And I really wanted to, it's funny, I remember saying to one of my girlfriends, there will be enough reasons that 3 daughters will have to resent their mother someday. I don't need to hand them one gift wrapped with a huge bow on top. So I decided to take some time off, and I was blessed enough to be able to stay home and be with my children for a few years. And so I did leave my career behind to pursue motherhood and just be home with my daughters, which 3 daughters turned into 5 daughters. And my hands were very busy for many years. And so I took about a 7-year break in which I was home with my daughters. And
so did I, but I was only home with 2 kids. So I don't know how you were doing it with that many. It's amazing.
It's funny when you say break, right?
Yeah.
Because that was when you're on the PTA and you're coaching soccer and you're doing,
Lindsay and I also talked about this because of her staffing. We were talking about the idea that you're like time off or a break. It's like the hardest thing you could ever do, being home with children. So, it is interesting though, the skills you acquire. And
for sure.
I'd love for you to share a little bit as a mother of 5 and a young mom. Do you look back now and think about the skill sets that gave you and how you kind of applied that moving forward?
Absolutely. Well, I went from being someone who needed instant gratification and so many things I did in my life to learning the art of patience, because do you need to have that? I also, I think, learned that balance that I spoke of earlier was something that became like second nature with my children, right? Like I learned to juggle, and I learned to, our favorite catchword, pivot, that we use all the time now. Like we were pivoting 15 years ago when
you were pivoting way before it was cool.
Absolutely.
Such a trendsetter. I love it.
For sure. But, I think that it was that constant need to be able to adjust. And I think that's something that makes us successful in our careers now, is the fact that as a parent and a parent of multiple children, you absolutely need to be able to realize that like there are days that you have 72 things on your to-do list and you're going to accomplish 4 of them because you have a toddler that's throwing a fit, or an elementary school kid that couldn't go to school that day, or a teenager who told you you're a terrible parent and you need to go cry for a while. Those are real things. So
yep, I'm so aware, so hyper aware of all the things you're talking about, especially the teenage stuff right now. And, one thing that's always struck me about you is you are very authentic with what you have going on, but you also, I think, strive to handle things with grace and with patience and with kindness. That's very apparent when interacting with you. And so, and I know that that's not always the case. So how do you balance how you're feeling inside? You mentioned things going on in your personal life or things with your kids, with the person that you are and the leader that you are in your job, in your community. Like, how do you strike that balance?
So my dad once told me that you have to leave your luggage at the door. And so, it's not something that I carry with me throughout every hour of every day, right? So I can be having a heated argument with a 17-year-old in the morning that has me maybe in tears on my way to the office. But I also have learned to stop, to treat myself to Starbucks, or to, walk into wherever and get a breakfast sandwich, or do something that's going to, fuel me, and to think about what I need to positively focus on for the day, and know that argument with said 17-year-old can honestly wait until tonight when we get to sit back down on the table together. It's not something I need to carry with me throughout my entire work day. And I think that's been really good advice. I also think that frustration and the heaviness of the world and things like that are things we all feel. I am not special or unique compared to anyone else in the fact that I have stuff going on in my life, or that there's stuff going on in this world. However, do I need to be that person that adds weight or burdens the people that I'm around with all the time with it? Or do we want to build each other up and try to find positivity amongst a day and find lighthearted things to talk about and such? Not saying that we ignore those things, because they very much need to be dealt with. I've just learned to do it in a different way. I have my close tribe of women that I share those things with, and we have our moments, and we go have a bottle of wine and we talk it out. But I also have learned to take a long walk and just let go of it before moving on to the next thing. Or, in the last couple of years, I will absolutely say I've joined the masses in talking to a therapist once in a while and having that third party to talk about. I'm not embarrassed about that.
Finding those outlets, you talk about your tribe, and I know the ladies you're talking about who are amazing, and I have that same, similar group. And when people feel, I think, the need to almost perseverate over things, or it's out there to everyone, I do say, I think it's important you find a key bubble that's your safe space, that you can unload that and then be able to clean it up and kind of leave it at the door. A word I've been using for myself recently is grace. And I sort of, we say be kind to ourselves, but I've started to switch kind to grace, like have some grace with yourself. We as women are so hard on ourselves, and we hold ourselves to such high standards. And you know what pointed it out to me? So I would really love your perspective on this. I only have one daughter. There's some stuff that gets reflected on you from your daughter that you don't quite realize you've been putting out. And because I'm so hard on myself and I hold myself to such a high standard, that trickles down into the way your kids feel when they're around you. And so I've had to work really hard on empathy and grace, just to be present. And I don't know, I guess, can you speak to how you've done that balance between being the professional, the mom, the daughter, all those things that we are, and doing it with kind of grace and kindness to yourself at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I always say it took me 40 years to love who I am. And I mean that. I think the last couple years of my life, though there has been a lot of things that have happened that I wouldn't have chosen for myself, I still really like who I am. And I think it took me realizing, as my daughters started to graduate from high school and pursue their collegiate careers or what's next in their chapters, I saw them being so hard on themselves. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to make it. I'm not going to get into the school I want. And I heard my voice in some of the things they were saying. And there was such a moment where I had to stand there and be like, this is on you. Ground yourself right now and start talking about the things that are great, not just about them, because that sounds like words, but believe in it for yourself as well. And so I always say I woke up on my 40th birthday, and that's the most corny thing in the world to say, but I looked myself in the mirror and I was like, I like this Abby, and I need to start showing that I like this Abby. I need to stop worrying about that I'm going to look heavy in such shirt, or that I'm not as, successful as this person, or, whatever that looks like. Who cares? Surround yourself with those amazing people that make you strive to be better. But what's great about you? And so I think that's kind of where I've shifted, in which now I look at my daughters and I try to talk to them about all the amazing attributes that they have and that they bring to the table. But they start to believe it when you can talk about it authentically yourself and say, the things that I'm really good at are, I'm really good at talking to people. I'm a great listener as well. I love to show up for my friends. I like to, small acts of kindness are my love language, and I like to do that for people. And so when I speak about how excited I am about something that I've done, it gives them the floor to be able to speak comfortably, to kind of brag on themselves as well, which is something I realized I hadn't been doing for a very long time. So I'm hoping that I'm instilling that in them now, and that they're starting to see that.
You absolutely are. And I think my business coach would call that modeling the behavior. And it's amazing how often we model the behavior professionally, but we forget personally, or have never processed. For me, that was the case. And what I'm learning professionally resonates so quickly, but putting into practice personally has been the bigger challenge, but also the greater reward. So with that, we're going to take a quick break, but we will be right back with Abby Silfies, because we want to talk all about the AHA and your involvement in our wonderful community and how people can get involved and help. So stay tuned. You're listening to Unscripted.
Home to the Iron Pigs in Dorney Park, Allentown is a city without limits. Food, art, dance, you name it, it's got it. Allentown's historic roots are matched with its vibrant culture to create an adventure that you'll never forget. Thinking of taking a trip? Follow Lehigh Valley PA on Instagram, and you'll find attractions, hotels, and sites you won't want to miss.
Welcome back to Unscripted. I'm here with Abby Silfies. Abby, thank you so much for being here today and sharing a little bit about your life. I know we could probably talk for hours and days on end, but I want to get to your work in the community because you talked about growing up and moving around and watching your dad pursue his career. You talked about being a mom, 5 daughters, and the lessons learned along the way with that, and working in hospitality. But when you went back to work, outside of the home, I should say, you really switched gears. So tell me a little bit about that and what was that epiphany for you?
So 11 years ago, I lost my best friend to brain cancer. And it was when I was staying home with my children, which actually was a blessing because we were able to really be part of the end stage of her life. And my children really got that life lesson. I had never, ever, ever heard of anyone young having cancer. To me, it was this grandparent's disease. And so it hit us hard. She was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer and originally given 6 months to live and was blessed with an extra 3 years on top of that. Still much, much, much too young. But 3 years worth of time in which we were able to watch her travel and finish her degree and do all these things that she had on her bucket list. And it was a complete eye opener, not just for myself, but for my family. We all have tattoos that say, I have one that says faith on my wrist. 3 of my daughters that are of age all have tattoos for Lindsay, my friend that passed away. But her legacy lived on all of us. So we started volunteering for the American Cancer Society in her honor. And through my volunteer work with them, my youngest daughter was going to full day kindergarten. And I was having that moment that moms that have stayed at home all of a sudden go, whoa, what am I going to do with 8 hours a day that all of my children are going to be out of the house? And so through my volunteer work, I had been teased all the time. Like, people get paid to do this, right? People, you could always come work.
I heard that same thing all the time when I was doing a lot of volunteerism.
Right.
And yeah.
And I always laughed about it, right? Because it was my hobby or it was my give back. And I just kind of did, sure, whatever. And then things just kind of happened in a very quick time period. I was not looking for a job. I was not even thinking about it. My daughter was going to kindergarten, and the woman that I had been working with at the American Cancer Society for years, volunteering at this point in time, told me she was leaving her position and she was moving on to something else. And she said, you should apply for this job. And I was like, I don't need a job. I have a job. I have 5 daughters. What are you talking about? But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this might be a pivotal time in my life. This may be the right next move. And so literally it was like 11:55 at night to a job that was listed until midnight kind of thing. And I threw a very, very weak resume into, the hat there and said, we'll give it a try. And they called me the next day and said, you absolutely must come in and interview. We've seen your work, you've led by example, yada, yada. And so that was kind of the first chapter. I was hired with the Cancer Society as what they called a community manager. I did some Relay for Life events and worked with Making Strides Against Breast Cancer. And I fell in love with the nonprofit world. It was so rewarding to do a job that was fun and interactive with volunteers, but that also had so many emotional heartstrings attached to it, and let me every single night go to bed thinking I made a difference in someone's life. And in this day and age, there's ever changing and restructuring and a million different things that happen with organizations. But I found myself looking for what was next. And What is so great about the Lehigh Valley, and I know Ashley, like you of all people know this more than anyone, is that we're so interconnected. We are such a special community. And I can remember I made 5 phone calls on this day that I realized like I need to figure out where I'm going next. And I made 5 phone calls, and 3 of the phone calls I made were to women that I really respect in our community. And all 3 of them had a connection to the American Heart Association. And all 3 of them were like, do you know that the American Heart Association's been looking for an executive director for months? Or do you know that there's this position that's opened? And I was like, no, I didn't. And ironically, my little sister was born with a hole in her heart, and I lost both of my maternal grandparents to heart disease. So heart had always been something that was important to my family. My dad had actually served on his AHA board of directors in Michigan. So he knew the mission, and the wheels kind of started turning. And from the day I left the ACS to the day I started at the AHA, only 4 weeks time went by. 5 interviews, 4 weeks of time. 2 of that, I think I flew to Austin and hung out with family and friends. It was a very quick pivot, but it was so natural. The group of women that I knew in our community that were already involved in the AHA made the transition so smooth for me. But even in interviewing with the AHA, it was so interesting to see how closely strung together the nonprofit community is in our area. But B, what the AHA had been lacking was exactly what I bring to the table, or what I feel like I bring to the table. I was asked a couple questions in my interview process to see if I would be a good fit. And I am one of those people that always like, has a question for a question. And so I was kind of asked, like, what do you think you bring to the table? And I was like, well, what table are we talking about? Because I'm going to kind of call you guys out on something. I sat at about 200 tables last year at events across the Lehigh Valley, and I never met anyone from the American Heart Association. So if you're asking me what I bring to the table, I ask you what table we're talking about, because I don't believe we have a presence. And that is something I'm incredibly passionate about.
I love that. And it's so important, because if you don't show up, you can't be a part of the conversation. And there's been such a meaningful shift for the AHA since you came on board. And I remember the same group of people, and we know so many women in common, saying, have you met Abby yet? Have you met Abby? You got to meet. And us getting together and finally sitting down and having time to talk. And I think that was one of the first things we said is it's sometimes undervalued, because people in nonprofits are like, well, go fundraise or work on the mission. But you can't really do either of those things if you're not actually entrenched in the community with the people that are your donors and your volunteers and all different levels. And I love how you meet people where they are. It strikes me as so significant. And I do think it's what makes you amazing at the job, is that you take the time to meet people where they are for whatever they can bring to the table. And you're very present in that. And, that's a skill that I think is very important. So is there something that along the way that taught you that, or is there advice that you have to people when they're trying to get involved or make a more meaningful career choice around that idea of listening, being present, connecting with people?
I think authenticity is key. I think that I always let you get to know me first, and then I kind of move into the why I'm so passionate about our mission. People donate or get involved with a cause because they not only have a personal connection to it, but there's also a trust factor there. And so if I'm expecting someone to write me a large check or to give me a large portion of their time, they need to have faith in me. They need to trust me. So I have kind of branded myself in that way. I'm not afraid to be the face of our organization if it helps me build trust and build real authentic relationships. There's also 2 really great pieces of advice, and they're things that I've led with in my career is that a mentor of mine years ago told me to always go to a first meeting empty-handed. You never want to be the packet or pamphlet girl that's like, here's your sponsorship packet, please sign or check your options. I think that the first meeting with people is always supposed to be a get to know you. Let's talk about what your needs are. Let's talk about what you're even looking for. I can remember sitting down with a woman one time that was like, I'm not a hugger and we don't do golf tournaments. Okay, I won't show you anything we have to offer about a golf tournament, but I think having those guidelines is key. My dad always told me to buy the pie. And I always thought that was the corniest thing. But what he meant was the way to get on someone's calendar is to invite them to lunch, to treat them to a cup of coffee, to stop by their office with, some sort of sweet treat or whatnot, but to make it where it's just comfortable, to do a kind gesture, to build that relationship. It's not about calling someone's secretary and saying, can I set up a meeting? Because especially in my job, people don't have time for the hundreds of nonprofits that we have in the Lehigh Valley. But if I can make them want to spend time with me and know that I care about what they're trying to do, that's where I seem to find some success. So,
and you're multiplying that by building a committee and a group of women who care about that and are then doing that same thing. So I think it's really been cool. I'm part of the Circle of Red, and I'm so honored to be a small part of that with so many amazing women. And I think that you're really leaving your mark in that area, Abby. And I want to talk briefly about the Lehigh Valley because you mentioned this area, and tell people, what is it you love about the Lehigh Valley? And are there some things you like to do here that you would want to share with people?
So I love the Lehigh Valley because it feels like home, even if it's not your home. I, did not move to the Lehigh Valley until I was well into my 20s and already had 3 children and whatnot, but it has become my home. I love that there's something to do, whether it is Monday night or Saturday morning, there's always something to do in the Lehigh Valley. I love that even in a year of tragedy that we have just experienced, there was still such a strong sense of community. There was whether it be a virtual event or some sort of forum that you could sign on to digitally and be part of it. We do things right here when it comes to community. I love that I can tell you 12 restaurants that I personally know the owners at and would love to go support, and that we really know how to support one another. I think that's unique to us. I don't know that a lot of my colleagues that represent larger cities would be able to say the same thing about the people they get to work with.
I love that idea that we are a great community that is, we've got big city thinking and we have a lot of opportunity here, but we really are very neighborly. So that's how I describe when I moved here 16 years ago. I just kept saying to people in New York and New Jersey, it's really neighborly. And so, that was a kind of foreign concept. Everybody always brings a dish or brings a thing or drops off something, and it's so thoughtful. And then that extends, I think, into our nonprofit community, our professional communities. So I love that as well. Well, before I let you go, I would love to ask you some rapid fire, quick questions that are just like fun.
Bring it.
And for our audience, you have not heard these, correct? Okay, you have not.
I have no idea. I'm a little afraid. The last time someone told me they were going to rapid fire me, they made me dance, and I hate to dance.
I will not make you dance. I will not make you dance. These are 5 quick questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. What's your favorite hobby?
Reading.
What is one food you cannot live without?
Tacos or sushi? Tacos.
What actress would you cast to play you in a movie about your life?
Sandra Bullock.
Ooh, nice. If you didn't have the job you have now, what would you be doing instead?
I would be a social worker at a hospice center.
Name one person who inspires you.
My dad.
Amazing. Abby, thank you so much for being our guest. I love talking to you. You are incredibly inspiring, and the work you're doing in our community is so important. If you don't know Abby and you don't know the American Heart Association, please take the time to log onto their website, get to know them. You're missing out if you don't. So Abby, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Heart.org. Check us out.
Heart.org. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. This is Unscripted with Russo. Until next time.